get this to the slideshow. If you weren't here last time, my name is Jessie Newman, and I'm from Skidegate on Haida Gwaii, and I'm Haida on my mother's side, and I'm Kwakwaka'wakw and Healthsick on my father's side. So I grew up in Skidegate, but I spent my summers in Bella Bella, and really always had a passion for food, especially seafood. I grew up in two fishing families, and also had many family members who had diabetes. And so really started to see the connection between our foods and, you know, health outcomes, and wanted to get into a career where I felt that I could somehow make a difference. And so I got into the dietetics program at UBC, and I'm a dietitian now. I work as the Indigenous health dietitian with Island Health. So I work with the North Island nations on Vancouver Island. And today I'm calling in from the homelands of the Likwala speaking peoples. So that's the Harlee-Kay and the Kwakwaka'wakw. Better known as Campbell River, I guess. And I work all over the North Island with Kwakwaka'wakw, Coast Salish, and New Chalmers nations. And I'm happy to be here to lead the conversation, something that's really important to me. And yeah, like Beangka said, if you have any questions at any time, please just ask. So are we okay to start?
I think I need about 1 more minute. My computer's being slow. I'm almost there.
Okay.
Thanks for your patience.
Hi, Jess Newman.
Hi, Auntie Shell. We're just waiting for the Facebook Live feed. I'm happy that you could join us today. I wasn't sure. I was going to send you the link, and then was pretty rushed this morning and forgot, but I'm so happy that you're here.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here too.
Cool. Are you still working from home?
No, I'm at work.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, there's just 3 of us, Jana, myself, and Carla.
Okay.
Rest at home working.
Alrighty, I think we're live, and just for the people who are new to join, just make sure that your microphones are muted. You can unmute yourself. If you have a question, just know that your voice will be heard on Facebook Live as well. If you're uncomfortable with that, use the chat function. And yeah, I think we can start now. Thanks, guys.
Okay, so I already introduced myself a little bit, but I'm Jessie Newman. I work as the Indigenous health dietitian with Island Health. And today we're talking about food and food as medicine. And I want to start off by saying that I know there's a great diversity between us in our access to and our experiences around traditional foods. And of course, there's many reasons for that. But I would say our intention today is to share stories and resources and recipes, and hopefully create a connection to traditional foods for you, maybe strengthen that connection. But I would say the best way to go about that is always to connect with a knowledge keeper in your area, and just to get a better understanding of our foods, more knowledge. I think that at any given time, there probably is some food that is quite accessible, and perhaps we just don't know about it. So it's just a bit of learning that needs to happen. And yeah, knowledge keepers are just amazing. So food as medicine is a term that I really grew up hearing often, and I think it's something that is probably that we all heard, like in every nation, yeah, in all Indigenous communities. And I would say my thoughts around that term have really changed as I've got older. So I really believe that that our foods are so deeply a part of our identity. Food really is our culture. Food is who we are. I would say foods really unite us. They unite families, communities, and nations through trade. And so to me, there's nothing really more powerful than our foods. And knowing the foods of our ancestors is so important because it really connects us to who we are. So I think that gaining some knowledge around these foods is just invaluable. And when we gather our foods, when we're in that process of eating our foods, I feel like it so connects us with our ancestors, and in such a positive way. Like, it affects all aspects of our health, and it's not just the physical, it's not just protecting us from disease. I feel like it affects everything, and in that way, again, it's so powerful. But even more than that, I feel like it's the social connectedness. I feel like we, you know, when we're doing these things, we're connecting with our family, we're connecting with others, and that's so important, and we're connecting to our ancestors. And I think that, you know, we all really have this inherent want to cook the foods of our ancestors. And so, like, as I've got older, I feel like that's how my view has changed. I feel like it's much more of a connection. That's how I see our foods. Like, yes, they are full of like antioxidants and vitamins and minerals, but there's so much more. And so we're going to share our stories around food, and I'm going to start. So like I mentioned at the beginning, I'm from two fishing families. Both of my grandfathers had boats, and my uncles were fishermen, my father was a fisherman, my cousins. And so every once in a while, me and my sister would get to go out fishing with our family. And you can see that this is us right here on my grandfather's boat in Bella Bella. And so I just have so many good memories around that. Being together with them in such a small space for days at a time, I feel like that really helps to build connection. And I could see that in them. Like, that was probably, like, they still talk about it. Some of my, you know, my dad's not here, some of my uncles aren't here, but just that connection was so amazing. And I remember like watching my dad pick a fish out of the ocean and cutting it up on the boat, like so skillfully. And he was usually the cook on the boat, and he would make fish soup, and he would like bake it or fry it. And to this day, I just like it the way that he cooked it. It was so simple. Like, it was usually just onions. And like, I'll just go through the photos here. This is my grandfather on his boat, and I still think of him as this way, like just so stoic. Like, I can see him in his pea coat, and he always wore a hat like that, always up on the deck, or, you know. And this is my dad here, and these are my uncles here on the boat, and my dad again. And this is my dad and my other grandfather, my Haida grandfather. So I feel like my dad was always out fishing. You know, there was always something that they were fishing for at any time of the year. And so I was really lucky to have access to our foods all the time. It's not the case now, but I do have special memories around sockeye, just because I did get to go out with them on the boat, and that connectedness, because some of them aren't here anymore. So I would say when I am eating sockeye now, it's almost like a nice cozy blanket. Like, it just makes me feel good. It makes me think of my dad and my uncles and those memories of them. And in that way, I would say, like, food truly is medicine. Like, yes, fish is probably one of the most perfect foods that we can eat in terms of its nutrition, but just in that connectedness that I feel, I would say it's even better medicine. So that's my view on food as medicine.
Awesome. So I think I'm just going to share a little bit about my food story now. I'm not sure if my screen is visible. Let's check here.
I can see your photos.
You can see the photo. Awesome. So yeah, this is Beangka talking. I'll share a bit about where I'm from. So I'm from the Sartlip Nation. That's a part of the Saanich Nation, which is on the southern tip of Vancouver Island. I'm from Sartlip on my dad's side, who is Charles Elliott. On my mother's side, I am from Songhees and Esquimalt nations, and so my family name there would be Albany from Songhees, and Warren from Esquimalt Nation. So that's where I come from. I grew up in Sartlip, and so I mostly identify as a Saanich person or a Saanich woman. A lot of the time that I spent growing up, I was lucky to spend with family and always around food. And for people who know me, they know that, like, food is my passion and traditional foods are my passion. And so I just like to share a little bit about our traditional pit cook. And so as I mentioned, traditional foods and medicines are a passion of mine, and something that I came to know was our Kwakwaka'wakw food systems. So Kwakwaka'wakw is our word for camas, and in the last, I would say, probably 3 or 4 years, I've been really fortunate to be mentored by different people, and one of the most, I guess, significant people in my life that kind of like helped me fall in love with camas is Cheryl Bryce, and then 2 other people who are not native, but they're super passionate about Garryoak ecosystems and camas, and that is Kristen and James Miskelly. And so I look to them as my biggest mentors. They've shared so much with me, and Cheryl was the person who showed me how to do a traditional pit cook. And so I'll just explain a bit about the process, and this is something that she helped me to do hands-on. It wasn't a theory class. We did it together with a bunch of other women who are from Saanich. And so it's basically one of the most ancient ways of cooking food underground. And so what you do is you dig a hole. It has to be about 3 feet minimum, and there's a lot of prep that goes into it beforehand. And so you have to collect rocks. There are certain types of rocks that you collect, so you have to know which rocks you're looking for. If you put the wrong one in, it could potentially explode. So you want to make sure that, like, you have the right type of rock. And my Uncle John Stelquith shared to get the kind of green, kind of smooth and dense looking rocks, and also shared, the ones with white in them, they'll give off like a bit of a bad smell, so not to get the ones with white inside of them. So I went out and collected a bunch of rocks that we needed. I think we gathered about, I think definitely well over 100 rocks, and we we had 2 different pits that we had that first time, and you build a fire over top of the rocks once they're lining the pit, and heat them up, and that process takes probably 3 to 4 hours, depending on how hot you can get the fire going. And by the end of it, there's just a little bit of firewood left. And at that point, you lay out all of the food and all of the greenery. And so a part of the process is harvesting the greenery that you need to line the pit, because you can't just put the food directly on top of the rocks. Your food might catch on fire, or yeah, it won't cook properly. So basically what happens is the firewood is shoveled off of the rocks. You do a layer of vegetation, which could be salal, sword fern, certain types of seaweed. So you do hot rocks, green vegetation, wrapped food, green vegetation, a canvas tarp, and then you pour soil over top and you let it cook for several hours. And so the pit is closed. Canvas takes at least 24 hours to cook in the ground. And then if you're cooking something else like potatoes and carrots, that takes about 4 hours. And so Cheryl also showed to me, how you check to see if your food is done. Without a thermometer, she calls it her Indian thermometer. You stick your hand in the soil and you look for the heat to come up to the top of the pit. And yeah, this is just my connection to food, and it's something that grounds me and something that I like to share with my family. And so that was for a community pit cook where we did that. But something that I do every year now is host a pit cook at my parents' backyard, and I invite friends and family, and everybody brings a meal, and I do 2 different pits, so one with more vegetables and one with meat in it. And the last time that we did it, we had the most amazing traditional foods feast that I've ever had. Like, everybody showed up with their best foods, and yeah, it's something that I think about, kind of this theme is that, like, when you're connecting to a traditional food, whether it's just, crab that you bring home and eat with your family, or a community event, or something like a pit cook like this, it grounds you in place. And for me, it's something that connects me to my culture. It helps with my sense of belonging. And it really is, like, as we're saying, food is medicine. Like, it's medicine to my heart. And when we share space, we're sharing medicine together. So yeah, that's my food story. Thanks.
Okay, and now Harlee is going to speak.
Hi, my name's Harlee, and can you hear me? Yeah, okay. I'm from White Bear First Nation in Southeast Saskatchewan, and when I was thinking about food as medicine and what that means, before I thought of any specific foods, I thought of my grandparents and my dad always reminding me and telling me, you need to eat. Have you ate breakfast yet? And so I was just visiting my dad and my grandpa a week ago, and it's the same thing. My grandpa made sure I ate breakfast every day. If he cooked for me, he would cook way too much food. And when I think about how that translates to food as medicine, I realized that my grandparents and my dad were always reminding me to nourish myself. And it was also a way of expressing their love for me. They love me, they care about my health, and they want to make sure that I'm nourishing my body. And they were also teaching me that to live a healthy life, I need to take responsibility for my health. And so while they were always reminding me I need to eat, they were also instilling in me that I need to make sure I'm eating meals, I'm eating good and healthy foods to live a healthy life. And so in terms of food I ate as a kid, my mom was a single mom, and we got a lot of our food from the food bank. And so not the best food. It was a lot of like boxed food, minimum fresh produce or meat. And so I remember when I first started to care about the food I was eating, I was in middle school, so probably around 12 years old. And I just started looking at the packaging to find out what was in the food. I had no idea what any of it meant, but I just started to become curious about the ingredients. And so it was around that time too, I decided I wasn't going to drink pop anymore. I knew, I just knew that there was a lot of sugar in it, and I heard that wasn't good for you. So I stopped drinking it, and even today I rarely ever have pop. And I think about this often and how at such a young age I made this decision and cared so much about what I was eating. And I think it goes back to how my grandparents and my dad were always reminding me I need to eat, that I need to take care of myself, and I have a responsibility to myself and others to nourish my body. And so I really internalized that, and although I didn't have access to the best foods, I felt that I did have the ability to make small choices, like to stop drinking pop. I would always go to the grocery store with my mom to pick out food, eating breakfast, and just making, noticing, oh, I didn't eat breakfast today, that's why I feel like this. And so now I have a 14-year-old niece, and we spend a lot of time together, and I know for a fact that her eating habits are not very good. And so every time we're together, I'm always asking about what she's eating, and I make it a priority that every time we're together that she eats a good, filling, healthy meal. And I think those little just reminders and eating a meal every time we're together do make a difference. The last time we were together, we went camping, and I pre-made a bunch of just simple like veggie burritos for her. And the next day she's asking me for ingredients because she wants to make it at home with her dad. And so she'll send me pictures of snacks, every time we're together. She'll ask if we can go to Bulk Barn to pick out a bunch of nuts and whatnot. So I know that those do make a difference, and that's how my grandparents and my dad were with me, and that's how I choose to be with my niece. And and so when I think about food as medicine, I didn't have access to the healthiest foods, and so that brings up a separate issue of food sovereignty and having access to affordable healthy foods, but also that still enabling people to educate them so they can make decisions on their own. So yeah, that's my food story. Thank you. And that's my grandparents in that picture. That's my Francis and Betty McArthur, and that's me as baby.
Thanks, Harlee.
Yeah.
Okay, Marco. Is Marco on the call?
I'm not sure if he is. Maybe he had an issue. I don't see him on the list. Maybe we can move along and then.
Okay. So next, we had hoped to do a food demo, and it was going to be fruit leather and berry tea, but unfortunately we can't do it today. But we're very lucky because Beangka is an amazing knowledge keeper, and she's going to go over some of the plants that are blossoming right now and bearing, and I'm not sure exactly which ones, but I'm going to turn it over to Beangka.
Do you think there's a way? I don't know if my camera is showing up.
I can stop share and you can share.
Okay. Cool. Let's see here. Oh, gallery view. That's not right. Speaker view. Oh, speaker view. There we go. I don't know if it's. Can somebody let me know if they can see me on here?
I can see you.
You can see me?
I can see you.
Okay. So I just wanted to go over some of the berries that we have in our territory and across BC. Some of them are common, and particularly the ones that are on South Vancouver Island. So, there are like different species that aren't available in South Vancouver Island. but there are some common ones that everybody will know. You might have childhood memories over them. And the thing that I think about wild foods is that they're just so packed with nutrition. And if we ask ourselves intuitively, why would they be so nutrition packed? We think about the way that they grow, right? If we were to look at something that has been cultivated, for example, a strawberry or a California strawberry, and they're big and they're huge, they're not very tasty. And I think a part of it is probably because we've, manipulated them and kind of, now I don't want to say like bred, but we've made like genetic crosses so that they produce quickly, that they're large. We might produce them for certain colors, for resistance to different microbes or fungi or insect predators. So there's a lot of manipulation that happens with kind of the food that we buy in a grocery store. And if we think about the foods that we find in the wild, they've evolved over time in our territories to be best suited to this environment. And so in Victoria, we have a rain shadow. And so a lot of the plants that we have here have adapted and evolved over time to become really drought tolerant. And we haven't, for most of the plants, tried to cultivate them, let's say in a garden space. So a wild berry is a wild berry, and we haven't done anything to try to change that. And so a lot of their nutrition quality, I think, because of that is there. So that's my intuition around it. Somebody can, raise their hand and say, hey, that's wrong. That's not why it is. But if we think about something like a rose or a rose hip, a rose hip on a rose like bush that you planted from a greenhouse doesn't have the same nutrition quality as a wild rose hip. And you find that really commonly when you look at the nutrition packs. They're quite different, and most of the native berries that we have would be considered a superfood because they're so densely nutritious. And the way that I like to look at berries and to observe berries in my territory is to look at some of nature's indicators. And so something that has been shared with me is that at the beginning of the season, we have a bird called the Swainson's thrush. And the Swainson's thrush is a migratory bird. It leaves in the summer, comes back in the spring. So it has its migratory route, and it has a really distinctive call. And in Sinchothan, it's called Kwakwaka'wakw. We have songs about Kwakwaka'wakw, about the Swainson's thrush, and the Swainson's thrush is the ripener of the berries. So at the beginning of spring, when we hear Kwakwaka'wakw come into our territories, we hear that song, and I invite people on their own time to look up Swainson's thrush. You'll recognize that bird call. It's super unique and distinctive. We know that our berries are being ripened by this bird. And one of the earliest plants to flower in our territories is June plum. Some people might also know it as Indian plum. I'm moving away from using that term and just calling it June plum. And so it's a shrub in our area, or you might look at it and see it as a tree. And it produces fruit with a large pit inside of it. If you eat it early in the season, it'll be super bitter. You might not like it. And if you eat it later in the season, when it looks like a bit more like a raisin, it is super sweet. And so if you don't like it and it's bitter, you're eating it at the wrong time. You have to eat it when it looks wrinkly and like a raisin. And you can just kind of nibble off the flesh of it and spit the seed out. They're mostly just good for eating fresh. I did have a friend once mix up in her freezer June plum and salal berry, and she made a crisp and served it to a whole bunch of people, and we were munching away and like biting into seeds. So she was horrified. But there isn't really like a good way of like getting rid of the pit other than just kind of spitting it out from your mouth. So that's one of the first kind of berries that we have in our territories, and it's Kwakwaka'wakw, the Swainson's thrush, that comes in and starts to ripen them. The other berry that we have within our territories is salmonberry, and salmonberry are really easy to distinguish because they're one of the first berries in spring. They're tri-colored, and so if you're walking, you know, alongside a river or a stream or kind of like a wet thicket, you might come across salmonberry bushes, and they'll have yellow, orange, and red berries on them. The shape looks a bit like, I would say, a blackberry shape, and they're quite juicy, and they aren't traditionally used for drying and storage, so they were mostly eaten fresh. There's the other berries that ripen more late in the summer, and so I have here, and I don't know if people are going to be able to see it or not, but it's trailing blackberry. So if you're able to see it, the leaves tend to grow in threes. So you can see here, there's 1, 2, 3. And if you're confused about our native trailing blackberry and Himalayan blackberry, the Himalayan blackberry, the leaves tend to grow in 5s. And then if you look closely, the color of the leaf is going to be a bit different. If you look even more closely at the vine, it's kind of got like a grayish tinge to it. The leaves are serrated, and they grow in these long vines along the ground or along bushes. And if you have trouble identifying things or you feel unsure of it, there's an app called iNaturalist. And so if you took a picture of a leaf part, so if you took a picture close up of a leaf part on iNaturalist, it'll identify like the top 10 species and give you the most likely species. And it's usually super accurate. You can store your observations. And it's also like good for keeping track of what's happening in your territories or wherever you're walking or you're harvesting. So you might notice, you know, from year to year, maybe this year trailing blackberry was ready mid-July, but you know, the following year it was you know, ready closer to August. And so you can kind of keep track of those kinds of observations through that app if you're not a person to journal. And yeah, it's just an accessible way to kind of reaffirm your learning of identifying different berry species. But definitely the difference of leaves growing in 3s compared to 5s is an easy indicator between Himalayan blackberry and trailing blackberry. They're like less common in our area is serviceberry. So I'm trying to think of another name. Saskatoon berry, I think, is the other name. I don't have an example of that right now. That's another berry that grows here. They tend to grow smaller, and something that was shared with me is that they used to grow larger in our area, and you know, because we aren't harvesting them and sharing prayers with them, the berries aren't producing the same way. So that was shared to me by somebody in my family. Another kind of common berry in our areas is huckleberry. So huckleberry would have been ready kind of probably like June, it's like a late spring berry. So you get the tiny little red berries. The leaves like are a lot smaller than the other berries that are around here. So they have tiny, like kind of forest green leaves, and they're definitely noticeable for their red berries that grow on the shrub. My favorite berry to harvest that is a native berry is salal berry. So I have a whole bucket of salal berries here. I had intended on sharing how to make salal fruit leather and 3-berry leaf tea. I can still go over the steps. I'm just having some camera difficulties, which is why I can't do it today. But salal if you're trying to identify it, it has oval leaves with smooth edges. It's quite waxy and thick. It's often used in floral arrangements, and when the flower comes out, they're little white bells. And I don't think I have any, so they're little white bell shapes, and they grow along here. So the fruit that's here is actually the flower with swollen sepals. So you can see, if I were to kind of pinch, I don't really want to get it on my laptop, but if I were to pinch it, it would spread out, and you would see that it's like kind of like a star shape. And that's because the fruit forms from swollen sepals on the flower itself. So they are ready anytime between about mid-July going into August. And if you've harvested wild berries before, you'll know that the time is really short on when they're going to be ready. So, you know, you might have seen salmonberry 1 week, and then the next week you go back and there's hardly any left. Maybe the birds ate them. Maybe they're less desirable. But the window of opportunity is quite small. And just to share with you guys, last week I went looking for salal-berry, and then the following week a bunch of them were already starting to spoil. So that's only, you know, a 1 week time period where they were ready in my area. If I wanted to look for some that were in good shape, I'd probably have to go to a cooler area. And you know, hopefully they wouldn't be gone and past their picking season. The reason why I love salal-berry so much is because they're really versatile, they're tasty, they're easy to pick, they're super common, you don't have to work very hard for them. And you don't go out and pick them individually. You can just pluck off the whole stem like this and throw them in your container, and then process them at home. So it doesn't take a lot of time to get a lot of them. And the flavor is quite palatable if you're getting them in an area where, you know, there's enough like water and sunlight. They can be a bit bland in areas where it's really dry. So I noticed just from one side of an area to the other, like the size and berries like really varied, and the taste can really vary. But if you pick them, let's say near a lake or near a stream, you know, kind of closer to water where they get like partial sun, they're going to be quite juicy and quite palatable. So yeah, I compare the flavor to a blueberry. So what I would do is, you know, pick like probably a couple bags of these, take them home. And then what I do when I get home is just pinch them off from the base. So they're quite easy to pinch off. And you can go along and do that to the entire stem. And so you'll end up with, you know, all of your berries off of the stem there. You can give them a rinse, and the recipe for making salal fruit leather is about just under 3 liters of berries. And so if you don't have enough salal berries, but you still want to use them in a fruit leather, you can mix them with blueberries, you can mix them with other berries. I tend to mix them with blueberries kind of like 50-50, and then add honey and a little bit of lemon, so the juice of 1 lemon. I can't remember right now the exact amount of honey, but we have a berry toolkit that has the exact recipe. Blend them, so you can blend them in a blender if you have a really good blender or a food processor. Put them on parchment paper on a cookie sheet, so you kind of pour it out. So about 3 liters of blended berry mix on a cookie sheet. I think you'll get approximately 1 cookie sheet full of fruit leather. And then you can dehydrate it in your oven on the lowest setting. So if you don't have a food dehydrator, don't let that deter you. put your oven on the lowest setting, the lowest temperature, and then you can open the oven with a wooden spoon. So you just close the door on a wooden spoon, and that lets any of the moisture evaporate. It should take in the oven, I would say like about 8 hours. It is something that you need to kind of check. So you could do it overnight. If you're using a dehydrator with racks, you do have to rotate them. I noticed that the dehydrator that I have to rotate them like frequently, and it takes longer in the dehydrator. Yeah, I do like drying things in my oven. It works well enough, and it's a lot easier to pour it out on a large cookie sheet than it is on the dehydrator that I have. It is a bit seedy and a little bit tart, so you can add honey to taste if you're not okay with the tart flavor. My kids love it. There's lots of ways that you can experiment with fruit leather. We've even made them with yogurt. So we've had like yogurt and berry mixes and dehydrated it that way. And you know, when I use yogurt, I just keep it in the fridge. It usually doesn't last long in our household, so I would never have to worry about anything spoiling. If you did want to keep it longer, you'd have to dry it out quite well. So you wouldn't want any moisture in it if you were going to keep it long term. So that's kind of the basic like method for making fruit leather. It's something that we've done, you know, traditionally since time immemorial. So the berries that we used were dried into cakes. So they were mashed up, sun and wind dried, and stored away for winter, where they'd be kind of plumped up in water in times of winter. It was also shared with me that you could mix it in with other things like fat. Here we have camas, which is our starch, so you can make kind of a berry and camas mix, which is kind of like almost like a pemmican. I often make like pemmican bowls, so I'll mix it in with like a nut butter, berries, like dried berries, yeah, different things like that. So the other recipe that I just wanted to share was a berry leaf tea. So you can use trailing blackberry here. So I would just dry out the leaves and only use the leaf part in the tea. Salal leaves and huckleberry leaves, and huckleberry is known for helping stabilize blood sugar. So those are the two recipes, and I'll hand it over to Jess.
Yeah, I just saw in the chat that Sarah asked if we will be sharing the resource. Thank you, Beangka. That was such good information. Yeah, so we do, in addition to that, like, yes, Beangka said that there is so much good nutrition in berries, and it's true. It's unbelievable. Like, they truly are one of the best foods that we could be eating. And I really believe in that. I have berries usually twice a day. There's a lot of fiber in berries, a lot of vitamins and minerals, antioxidants. So it's really great for fighting inflammation and preventing sickness, managing blood sugar. There's just so much to them. And then in addition to what Beangka said about like berries that would be great for fruit leather, like usually low water berries are great, like huckleberry is really good as well. Thimbleberry would be great, but I've made this with kids with all sorts of crazy things. Like I put mango into it, just about any kind of fruit you can think of, but always keeping the berries in that because you really need that pectin to get that nice texture. Some tips that I would give you are not making it too thin, because I've definitely done that, and then it just doesn't really peel off the wax paper well at all. So trying to make it quite thick, and I think it's kind of trial and error. Like I've definitely made it too thick and it doesn't dry as well, but kids love making it, and I find that they really take ownership over it as well, and they're much more likely to eat it if they've made it. And so like I've just seen them so excited about fruit leather that they've made. And of course it's much more nutritious than a fruit roll-up. So we have the recipe in the toolkit, and I kind of want to walk you through the toolkit. I've got it right here. So this is so amazing. We came across this from my friend Fiona Devereaux, who used to be the Indigenous health dietitian. This is put together by one of her friends, and there's a lot of good information around the nutrition of berries, but there's also a lot of recipes. There's a berry identification toolkit in here. There are many stories. There's a berry bingo game, which I haven't tried yet, but Beangka has, and says that, you know, people really enjoy it. And I think that would work with like lots of different groups, like kids, elders, everyone in between. So, and then some of the recipes in here are quite good. And so this is the recipe Beangka was talking about, the Solel fruit leather, and the method that you want to use around that. But like some of them, and then this is the berry tea as well. And berry tea is really good for like soothing sore throat. There are many different, there's lots of things that it's good for, like preventing conditions as well. And then there are recipes for berry infused waters. So it's quite comprehensive. There's so much to it. So I really like this, and I hope that you would, you know, download this and use this in whatever sort of practice that you're doing in communities. I think it would be so great for kids, especially, like getting outside. So that's one recipe or one resource that we wanted to share. But also there was this amazing program that started in the 80s in Bella Coola, and it was the New Hulk Nutrition and Food Program. And so this was like Nancy Turner and a dietitian named Harriet Kuhnlein, who really like analyzed all of the foods within the New Hulk diet and did nutrition composition around the foods. And so this is just the berry portion that we'll be sending you today. But there's a lot of good information here around like identifying berries, what they were used for traditionally. And, you know, yes, it is New Hulk, but I feel like most of these berries are used within most nations along the coast. So I think this is a super cool resource. I like to look at it a lot. And like you can see which berries are higher in sugar, which are higher in fiber. So I find it to be quite informative. And then another resource that we have to share is this book called Food as Medicine. And this was created by my colleague Fiona Devereaux and iSpark, which is Indigenous Sports something, I can't remember. But it's really great because it focuses on the seasons. And I find whenever I bring this to health fairs, like people just love it because it talks about, like it, you know, focuses on the seasons, but it talks about like how to harvest foods, where to harvest them, nutrition, the time of year, and then it gives 3 recipes as well for each food that it talks about. And so these are foods that tend to be more accessible to people. And I think this would be really great, especially if you work for kids, putting it into your curriculum. There's lots of great learning in here. Like, I can't say enough good things about this. This is probably one of my favorite resources, and I tend to use it a lot in my practice. So we have the PDF for this that we'll be sending out, and I do have some copies as well in my office in Campbell River. So if you wanted some, you could definitely stop by. I do have quite a few. So like, I think that these three resources are super helpful. I find them helpful, and I hope that you'll use them in your learning and in whatever sort of work you do as well. And I'm just seeing that it's about 5 to 1, and I really wanted to leave time for questions from people. So does anybody have any questions?
I have a question. I don't know if you can hear me. Hello.
It's a little bit choppy, but I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I was just gonna go in about the seasonality with the berries, and I was just gonna see about with the edible berries. Is that gonna, like, with your resource that you have, that community edible berries? Would you be able to share the link?
Sorry, what? I couldn't hear part of that. I heard something about edible berries.
I think the question was around sharing information. So the berry, just so everyone knows, the berry toolkit, if you send me your email in the chat privately, I can send it directly to your email. If not, I'll post a link to, I've made a drive folder for the resources. So I'll put that there, and you can copy and paste it and save it somewhere for yourself. But the berry toolkit has the information on which berries are edible, where you can find them. Yeah, but I mean, I can send it directly to your email if you send it privately. And then we have one more question. It says, one thing, this is from Carrie Lee. One thing I wanted to ask is to Jessie, it would be great to create a partnership with the school district to add this to Foods for Students, and also to share how to become a dietitian.
Yeah, Carrie Lee, we should work on that. I'll contact you. I do work with some of the schools in Campbell River and in Port Hardy. So I would say, like, those are kind of where I've worked so far. But yeah, like, it's kind of hard to make that connection within school sometimes. Like, it's just very random that I've made these connections with teachers and got into classrooms. But yeah, like, recently I did a talk for students who were looking to get into UBC, just talking about, like, my work and the path to that. But that was just for a small group that was involved in a program called VICE. And so, yeah, I of course love to share my passion and would love to speak to students about becoming a dietitian, because I feel like so often people kind of go into nursing or medicine and don't really think of dietetics as an option, or don't really know about it or the work that we do. So yeah, Carrie Lee, we have to connect on that. I'm happy to do that.
Okay, so I'm just going to end the live stream, but I'll keep this open in case anybody else